I received my training when I was trained as a clinician, and in parallel, I received a training as a researcher in basic sciences in neurobiology. Unfortunately, I was never very efficient as a clinician, or in the words of one of my supervisors, I was absolutely mediocre. Fortunately, I was slightly more efficient as a researcher, but my ambition was always to write a research program that would be relevant to human condition. And in 2003, we have launched a longitudinal study, a mother-child study in Montreal and Hamilton, where McMaster is located and is not located in Toronto, as written. And under the direction of Mrs. Hélène Gaudreau, we have designed a research program, but always with the ambition to create a research protocol that could be adapted for the implementation in social services program. So it is with great pleasure that I'm working with these people. We work in cooperation with the Dr. Julien's Foundation, and we hope being able to create an integration between both, to have all this integrated. I think it's a very important ambition because there are major gaps in the context of our ambitions. Simply put, we don't take into account the individual differences of the brain. In the context of these gaps, there are some emergent ideologies that are very important. For example, the movement from 0 to 3. Nobody in this room offered an argument against the importance of the preschool development period or interventions for these programs. So our programs are largely directed towards this period of development. However, there are implications of this ideology that has an impact on those who design public policies. Let's say that after 3 years, there are very, very few interventions for other periods of development. With more and more knowledge on the various periods of development, there is still a lot to do as to the influence of other factors on the brain development. And also we have to identify factors that will allow us to identify vulnerable children and also the diversity of children. I will present to you a research program that is devoted to another period, not after 3 years old, but indeed before that period. I will talk to you about the importance of the prenatal period. What do we see here? Briefly, I will talk to you about a research program that we initiated in Singapore that is inspired by another program. So there's a unique aspect of this program. It's the capacity of acquiring images and to do some IRM with the children during the first week of their life. It's a protocol, indeed, It's maybe surprising, but it's very easy to implement. It's a very easy thing to do for newborns. I would like to underscore the fact that there is no sedation used for this protocol. On the contrary, we simply have to allow the mother to, to have the relationship with the child, and it's a very efficient protocol. And the radiology department in Singapore realized that are able to make an imagery with newborns without general anesthetics. And over the last 2 years, they indeed reduced the frequency of the use of general anesthetics by 50%. This is only to convince you how easy it is to implement this protocol at this stage. Another advantage is only the fact that we can make an imagery of the brain at the time of birth. What we see here are images of the brain, an adult brain. This is at 6 months, and this is the newborn brain. Obviously, there are a lot of development that occurs between the moment of birth and even during the first year of the life. You see this on the images of the connections and structures. However, at the same time, we can create some plans and see what is in place at the moment of birth. At the same time, we can carry out studies on the individual differences that exist at the moment of birth and determine the factors that have an impact on these individual differences. We determined that many factors related to the mother, her nutrition, her metabolic state, and especially her mood are important, if not crucial, to determine the individual differences at the moment of birth. And we wrote many articles on the influence of the mood of the mother, namely on the structure, on different structure of the child that are crucial to determine the mental health of the child, of the newborn. Not only can we explain the variations in the structures themselves, but in the connections of these structures. What was really surprising was the fact that not only there is an impact of the mother on the brain structures at the moment of birth, but even on the connections. For example, if we talk about amygdala, we can see that there are individual differences between the connections between the amygdalas and the mood of the mother that exist during the moment of birth. These structures are already in place. So things that are important for us at this stage. First point, obviously, many important developments occur during the prenatal period that determine the individual differences at the moment of birth. Second point, in the context of these studies, a major study with 1,000 mothers recruited while they were pregnant, we used the number of symptoms of depression of the mothers to establish, the emotional state of the mother. Only 1% of the mothers were clinically depressed. The others were a normal population, which means that these impacts are obvious around the population. It's not necessarily only it doesn't. It's an influence that is very important for the population in general, not only for the mothers depressed. We follow the children with traditional measures, including the famous child and behavior checklist. It's a study that deals with the behavior of the children. If we look at the internalization study is to check the depression and anguish symptoms. At 24 months, we see that there is a statistic correlation between the structure of the amygdala and its score on this measurement of internalization, or this score on the well-being structure. It exists at 24 months. No, not with the but we see the volume of structure in the prefrontal structure and this measure of emotional well-being. What should be realized is that this measurement of structure was done at the moment of birth, which means that the structure, the variations, the individual differences in the structures. I have only 5 minutes left. I have so much to say. We're dealing with the prefrontal cortex. So what we should realize is that these measurements were done at the moment of birth, which means that a variation of the structure of this prefrontal cortex determines the socio-emotional function at 4 years old, which means that it's very important. I will leave you with this message, and you do understand the message that the mother matters. It's important in our intervention, and it's absolutely crucial for you. I know that you understand this very well, but for those of you who are responsible for designing public policies, I hope that we can make the argument that we have to take into account the emotional state of the mother, and not only by those impacted by clinical depression, but we have to use this for the population, for the overall population. Thank you very much.